All right, I hope we're live. I've got my phone turned around right now. Let me see if I can see the screen just a little bit because I want you to be able to read what's on my whiteboard. Okay, looks good. I'm on my phone just because my webcam on my computer just crapped out. It's been giving me some issues, but I'm trying to pull this up on the page while I'm live so that I can at least make sure that you can see me, because I don't want to flip this into selfie mode because then you won't be able to read anything I write on the board because it'll be backwards. So bear with me just 1 second. Is this okay? Good. Live. Okay, I can see me. Looks like it's a decent angle. You can see my board. Okay, perfect. Awesome. We're making it work. So I've got my phone set up here. I can't see you guys on my phone screen because if I go in selfie mode and I start writing on here, then it's just going to be backwards. And I know a lot of you are very skilled in reading backwards, but let's not work on those challenges today. So, but between now and after this, when I can run to the store to get a new webcam, because mine just apparently just wants to be blank white, I'm going to work with my phone right here. So we're going to make this work. So anyway, super excited to be with you guys today for our power session. Happy Tuesday. Happy power session. Welcome. Hope your 4th of July was phenomenal. Hope Canada Day was great a few days before that, depending on where you're coming from. Hope your summer's been great wherever you're at. And glad you're back here with us today for today's power session. I'm going to be talking about something that I love to be able to teach, and of the speeches that I give every year, this tends to be one of the points that impacts the audience the most, that I hear about the most in terms of people letting go of some unnecessary pressure on themselves to perform or be at some expert level. Because there's a lot of challenges as we watch people create success, as we watch those that we want to emulate, that we want to follow in their path in terms of what they're able to accomplish in business, as entrepreneurs, as parents, whatever the case is. One of the risks that we run constantly is comparing our insides to their outsides. And a lot of what we hear from the way people were able to create their success, we hear a lot about the result. We hear a lot about the outsides. And then we get some subtle and sometimes some direct references to the insides, but not nearly as much as what happened on the outside. And not nearly as much focus is put on some of the internal struggle and the real details. I mean, we get that in terms of some inference. We get that in terms of some general abstract ideas that, yeah, it's tough and that, yeah, it takes one step at a time. And we hear all those things, but to really break down what's going on in the inside and be able to understand those thinking patterns, to really understand what holds us back in our lives is critical. And that's what we do here at the Habit Finder and the Mandino Leadership Institute. We have committed to the last 20 years to be rare in our approach to personal growth, rare in our approach to leadership development, and understanding that all of those things, whether it's building a business, being a better spouse or parent, deeper relationships, better health and vitality, they all funnel down into one thing, and that is the way we think, our thinking habits. The Habit Finder, aptly named, is designed scientifically and mathematically to find, in about 15 minutes or less, the thinking patterns that you have going on up here. What are the conversations going on in your brain? Now, of course, in conversations, that usually involves more than one person. Well, there's more than one character involved. There's you, your true self, who you really are, and then there's your habits of thinking. Some of those habits of thinking are in total alignment with who you are. So in that matter of fact, they are you. But we want to identify the habits of thinking that have evolved and adapted and changed, reacted to your environment, reacted to the way you were raised, reacted to experiences at school or some heartaches or tragedies or some of the highs of your life, and how they react and compensated to allow your brain to still find some kind of equilibrium in its own assessment, regardless of what's going on outside you. And what we find many times with the Habit Finder is there were thinking patterns that needed to be shifted to get through something, to be able to make sense of something that was difficult to emotionally comprehend, to be able to wrap our heads around at any given time. All of us have been in situations that we weren't emotionally or psychologically or even physically prepared for. And all of these can impact the way that we think. The challenge is the thinking patterns and the adaptations we needed to get through those things are oftentimes holding us back to get to the next levels of our lives. because often they were created to survive something difficult, okay? Or to make sense of something so fantastic we couldn't completely wrap our heads around it, and it created compensations, okay? These are called compensatory mechanisms, okay? It's just a fancy term for your brain shifted the way it was thinking to make sense of what it was experiencing, good or bad. And oftentimes as we gain a greater level of awareness to get where we want to go in life, to reach a new dream, a new goal, it's these compensatory mechanisms, it's these shifts in our habits of thinking that are holding us back to get there. For example, if you needed to cross a river, okay, you put on these waders, okay, these big rubber boots come right up to your chest that you see people fishing in, to get across without getting soaked and wet and wrecking your socks and your boots. Because if you then have to continue on in your journey with wet boots and wet socks, you're going to get blisters. It's going to be a terrible journey. And so your brain makes the adjustment to put on waders so that it can get across this river. Now, it needed that to be able to get across the river, but oftentimes, in this analogy, we continue on with the journey with the waders on. And if you've ever worn waders, they're not the easiest thing to be agile in or to hike in. They're great for keeping you dry, and that was the purpose. Your brain needed it in that time of your life. But if you're continuing to wear waders through the rest of your life, you can see where something that helped you through this is not necessarily serving you through the rest of your journey. That's why at the Habit Finder, we want to measure what those thinking habits are. Because it's not a matter of them being good or bad. It's a matter of finding the ones that served a purpose that are now sabotaging you because they're not relevant to where you're headed. They're not supporting who you are. They're not supporting where you want to go. You add on top of that the fact that personal development is actually a biological game. You're actually changing neural pathways in your mind. Because your brain has one objective, and I talk about this ad nauseum, and that is to keep you safe. In other words, to keep you predictable. Now, it sounds nice keeping you safe, but when it comes to thinking about keeping you predictable, your brain's top priority isn't evaluating whether you're having fun or not, whether you're loving everything that you're doing or not. It just wants to make sure that whatever you're waking up to, whatever way you're making decisions right now, whatever way you are creating your reality, because it's your reality, it's not the reality. Your brain creates your own reality, okay? And we get frustrated playing reality bumper cars in this world, rather than being able to let go of that and start to observe the thinking habits that are creating our reality. Then we get into an elevated position to start to see what other people's thinking habits are created in their reality and want to understand those things, which allows us to create connection, which allows us to learn more about them, learn about us, bring down walls of resistance, be able to have more cooperation and productivity, and the world becomes a much better place. And this is what we teach. We've been working with over 150,000 entrepreneurs and business leaders. And what I want to share today is an element that I don't want to get into the semantic battle of the term mediocre, okay? I just want you to disrupt a pattern. I want to show you a different perspective using the term mediocre to do so. But it is interesting that the majority of what we want, in fact, beyond that, I would probably dare say everything we want in life is hiding behind what we're resisting or what we're avoiding. So meaning, if you get really good at being curious, turning up your resistance radar, your rebellion radar, your avoidance radar, and starting to get really clear about what things you are avoiding in life, what things you are resisting in life, what things you are rebelling against in life, you are likely going to find the very dialogue, the very compensatory mechanisms, the very compensations that are holding you back from getting to the next level. I love, and I believe every majorly successful person, every holistically successful person, meaning every part of their life is progressing because it's principle driven, not procedure driven, okay, has some kind of perverse desire to seek out where their resistance is. What do they rebel against? Now, this is easier said than done because our brain has incredible ability to hide and disguise and manipulate and justify and rationalize our resistance and our rebellion and our avoidance. But it's one of the reasons why when I talk to people about what they want in life, which I ask every potential client that I get to talk to be able to work with people that are coming into this organization. I don't get to talk to all of them, but every once in a while I want to check in with where our potential clients are at, and I get the opportunity to visit with a few now and again to kind of keep that alive for us, for me. And I'll ask them, what do you want? And 9 times out of 10, people are much clearer about what they don't want than what they do want. They're much clearer about how they don't want to be interpreted or how they don't want to be understood versus how they do want to be understood. More clear about what they're trying to avoid than they are about what they're trying to create. And it's interesting because then they find themselves frustrated not being able to get there. And therein we find this deficit of what we avoid and resist and rebel versus what we want to engage, what we want to create. That's really what we want to understand. Now, in being able to do so, I want to take on a part of resistance that I've heard from a lot of people for a long time. Okay, even Mandino talks about going against mediocrity. And just for the sake of today's discussion, we're going to call this 2 different things. I'm not going to refer to it as mediocrity. Okay, we're going to refer to it as mediocre. And what I want to do is shift a resistant or rebellious thinking pattern using this particular term. Because for a lot of people, especially in personal growth, especially in personal development and leadership and entrepreneurship, this can be a bad word, okay? And so as we consider this bad word, we're going to use it to be able to go in search of resistance and rebellion for this word itself as a lesson today. Now, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to consider what words come to mind for you when I say mediocre. When I say mediocre, what do you think of? Okay, I've shared this on tons of stages, and I usually hear things like average, or plain, or meh, okay? It's usually not positive, okay? Loser, whatever the case is. I don't usually hear productive, constructive things when it comes to the way people consider mediocre, which is a challenge, because we want to understand what this term really means. What mediocre means so that we can identify some resistance in our life and some resistance in what we're trying to create. So, if we break down mediocre, we get a really beautiful thing. First part of the term is medius, which means the middle or halfway. The other part is ochre, which means jagged mountain. We could stop right there, and we've already shifted the way we look at mediocre, okay, and what this does to us, or in this case, as we shift it, does for us. To understand that mediocre, this average, plain, loser, underperforming idea, all of those things that have resistance tied to them, because we don't want to be a loser, we don't want to be average, we don't want to be underperforming. We have resistance to those things. But when we really break down mediocre and understand that it is halfway up the jagged mountain, we go from this idea of it being like Loserville, okay, to understanding, I can draw a slightly better mountain than that, okay? Here's a snow-capped mountain, okay? You're right here. You're halfway up this jagged mountain that you're looking to create. That's pretty awesome, okay? Because jagged mountains are not easy to climb. For those of you who have ever climbed one, jagged mountains are not easy to climb at all. And so to be halfway up, to embrace that, to celebrate, to be like, wow, look at how far I've come, and I'm super excited about how far I still have to go. That's mediocre. That's a position of peace. That's a position of passion. To be able to have this balanced perspective of being able to see what you've fought for, what you've created to get to this point, but still clearly see that you have not arrived. It's a beautiful place to be. It's a place where creators thrive on being. Because as they start getting closer to the top of the mountain, their mind, their dreams creates a higher mountain. And they open their eyes and they're once again at their mediocre. They're halfway up this jagged mountain. They can see how much further they've come, but they still have even that much further to go because they are in love with the journey. They are in love with creation. And they aren't spending their time and energy resisting and rebelling some place that they used to hate to be. I don't want to be mediocre. Well, I hope by the end of our conversation today that you start finding a desire to embrace your mediocre. to embrace the reality and the beauty and the joy and the passion and fulfillment of being halfway up a jagged mountain. The jagged mountain being the journey of life. The jagged mountain being the journey of creation. That is a challenging one. It is a difficult one. And you want to understand the principles that are driving you to here so that you can turn around and use them to get there, to be able to continue this journey, to get to a higher and higher level of altitude. And I'll take this a little bit deeper for you to show you what I mean. Here's the challenge with the resistance and the rebellion that shows up for mediocre. Here is your current reality, okay? This is you. Hi, you, okay? That's your current reality. That's your current mediocre. Now remember, mediocre is halfway up the jagged mountain, so let's consider this. This is a place we don't want to be. Here's where we really want to be. Traditionally, this has been a place we don't want to be. Let me get a darker marker real quick. This has been a place that we want to be, okay? This up here, yay, is future you. So here's where we are. Here's where we want to be able to create what we have, okay? And this is the success that we want to create in our relationships. This is the home we want to live in, the place we want to live, the money we want to be making, whatever it is, okay? This is the future you that we're looking to create. Now, we've got quite a climb to be able to get there. And we start by resisting and rebelling, and, not to use two ends in a row, but avoiding this. This is, over 90% of the time, what drives entrepreneurs to get there, is they resist where they currently are. They rebel against where they currently are, and they avoid where they currently are. And why do they do this? Well, let's examine a little bit closer what's going on here in the brain. What's going on here is what's called a systemic dilemma. Okay? A systemic dilemma, which means it is a all or nothing choice. Your brain, at its core function, and its amygdala, its lower brain that has one of the most powerful influences over your life and what you think and how you process, I think I can bring this a little bit closer, okay, operates in a systemic way, in all or nothing fashion. And so, if it doesn't want any part of your current reality, if it doesn't want all of it, then it can only process that it wants none of it. It wants nothing. So its natural reaction is going to want you to hate this, to dislike this, to not appreciate this. And this is the noise that you'll find if you've taken the Habit Finder and you look at your My Joy section. If you go and look at the My Joy section, the second section of the Habit Finder, this is where you're going to find all this noise about your current mediocre. If you're really clear there, then you're in a really powerful position to be able to start to work towards this. You may not feel as motivated to get there because you've got a lot of natural joy, a lot of natural clarity here. And if we understand human beings, we are 8 times more motivated to avoid pain than to seek pleasure. However, being motivated is something that forces action. Being inspired is something that pulls us into the future. So if we try to motivate ourselves to here, which is our only option, if we are resisting, rebelling, and avoiding, our only option is to motivate ourselves to this. This is the answer. I just need to get enough motivation to get there. This is what we typically do. So we're down here, and we're resisting our mediocre, which is this place where we currently are, okay? Mediocre, medius, middle of the mountain, okay? We're halfway there. In business terms, this is referred to as the status quo, which is really just a fancy term of saying your most reliable level of performance. I mean, if you averaged out your performance across the year, your mediocre would be the median. It would be the average level of performance. In other words, your most reliable level of performance. Meaning across the ups and downs of the day and the months and the year, and you average all those out, this is the level of performance you can most count on, is your current reality. And yet, we resist it, we rebel it, and avoid it. Why? Because we want to be motivated to get to the future. We want to be motivated to get there. We want to force action, okay? That's what motivation is. We want to force action to get there. And so what we do is we build up higher levels of resistance, build up higher levels of rebellion, higher levels of avoidance, and we end up firing out of here like a cannon, okay? And we start fighting up to try and reach our future life. And we're, oh, I got this, okay? We attended a convention, or we attended an event, or we started a new book, or we just had a great weekend to ourselves to kind of gather our thoughts. And now we are more motivated than ever. Not realizing that what we were doing was stoking the fire of resistance, rebellion, and avoidance to force action to our future selves. And so we come firing out of the cannon like a rocket, and it feels amazing, feels awesome, and then, boop, we land right here. We always land short. It's just inevitable. We are built to create expectations as entrepreneurs that are just going to be unmet. It's one of the number one challenges in terms of our own confidence and our own vision is unmet expectations. And so we land right here, and then we're like, okay, no problem. We're going to be able to get there. And then this landslide of challenges that we didn't see, of shortcuts that we now have to pay for, of all these different things, and it just knocks us all the way back, if not even further down. So let me summarize. How many of us have ever experienced this? Where we realized we were no longer satisfied with where we're currently at. And without even realizing it, we started turning that energy into resistance. We started resisting our full-time job because it kept us from being able to really build what we really wanted. We started resenting people that distracted us and didn't believe in us. We started avoiding things that were boring, repetitious, and mundane. And we just stoked this fire, and then finally one day, it's usually Monday, we come firing out of that cannon, to get as close to our future selves as possible, only then to be pounded by a landslide of unmet expectations and challenges we weren't ready for, and we come falling back down this jagged mountain and usually end up further back than we started. How many of you have ever been motivated, forced action, motivated, an external force, even one applied to yourself, by yourself, to get there? You didn't get there and you felt yourself just, ooh, and you needed a couple of days, or even a couple of weeks, or even in some cases, depending on how much firepower you had coming up here, a couple of months to recover from that. You actually needed to get back to where you were when you started because of how crushing, how disappointing, how difficult it was to get so close to the future you. You could taste it, you could touch it, you could feel it, but then you just came flying back here. Now, let me make a point really quick. I am not anti-motivation. I think motivation can be really important as a supplement. Motivation can be a powerful supplement to how you really want to build to this. And the way you want to really build to this is you want to build to it by being inspired. Okay, so let's rebuild this. Same concept. Got future you, got current you. Now, if this is our current mediocre, this is our most reliable level of performance, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose us. We're going to choose where we currently are. We're going to take a look at the house we live in. We're going to take a look at the gifts we've been given. We're going to take a look at the opportunities that are right in front of us. We're going to take a look at the challenges, the handicaps, the different things that hold us back, all of it, the things we like about ourselves, the things we don't like about ourselves. We're going to look at all of it, and we're going to choose us. We're going to choose ourselves. We're going to choose our mediocre. We're going to choose this wholeheartedly. We're going to bypass the systemic dilemma of our brain, and we're going to fall in love, which uses our heart. We're going to fall in love with this. When we fall in love with this, we embrace it. Big difference between embracing it and settling for it. We are not settling for this. We are embracing this. We are owning all of who we currently are. So we're not wasting any energy dreaming and fantasizing about how wonderful it'll be when we are something else. Because there is no power in this universe, that will give you more of something you don't want. Okay? I was talking with a group that we're coaching the other day. Imagine going into a car dealership and the salesperson actually owns the car that you want to buy. Okay? They've got the same make and model that you went in there to buy. So of course, tell me about it. And imagine them being like, it's okay. I mean, I kind of liked it at first, but been really frustrated with it. The likelihood they're going to be able to sell you that car is not great. But imagine that it's a great car. They just are so focused on the car they wish they had that they haven't totally embraced the car they currently drive. When in fact it is totally embracing and using the car you currently have that's going to get you to the cars that you'd like to be driving later. It's antithetical, meaning it's counterintuitive. It's the opposite of the way your brain naturally works. Because it goes, we can't embrace this, because then we'll settle for this. Remember, all or nothing? If we think that this is all, then we don't need that. But we really want that, so we can't embrace this. Well, that's why we're going to bypass our brain and allow our heart to come into the equation to fall in love with where we currently are. Fall in love with our most reliable level of performance. And when we do that, then rather than creating and stoking this fire, okay, we can actually embrace and we can engage in life and add value and contribute. And when we do that, the path to get there becomes a path of inspiration rather than motivation. And I love motivation being a forced action. Inspiration is something that pulls you into the future. It actually is magnetic. It's attractive. It pulls you into the future. It comes from deep within. It comes from passion-driven action. It's from things you can't stop thinking about, from stuff that just makes you appreciate your current life that much more so that you can use it to the best of your abilities to create the next one. And when you do that, we don't need to launch out of some cannon to try and reach something that we'll never actually reach because it's an unrealistic expectation, but rather we take the first step. We're able to get here. We fall in love with here. And then we build the habits and the thinking patterns and the principles that will support this until this becomes your new mediocre. And then we do it all over again. We fall in love with this. Embrace this. Engage in this. These new habits that are just a small step above where we were before. And now this becomes the new mediocre. This becomes your new, most reliable level of performance. Meaning you balance all your worst days, all your best days, and this becomes your new mediocre, which is now better than your previous mediocre. If your mediocre never changed, if it was static, then yeah, we might find ways to resist it, to get away from it, to beat it. But your mediocre is dynamic. It follows you. As you become more, rather than just try to do more, as you become more, your mediocre becomes more. Your most reliable level of performance becomes more. And then, guess what you can do then? You can take the next step, and the next step, and the next step, and the next step, and the next step. There is no timeline for how long each of these steps make. And every once in a while we might step too far and too fast, and then we're going to settle back in a little bit. You can see this in the stock growth of some major companies. Okay? You can see this in Amazon where they peaked and settled in, and then peaked and settled in, and peaked and settled in. They pushed it just a little too far and then it settled in. But it was still net, it was still progressing year over year. That's what we're looking to do. It's not up to us to determine how long it takes to get here. Okay? It's about being all in to make this your new mediocre, to fall in love with everything this is so that you have a greater level of clarity and a greater level of ability to take the next step. Rather than building the resistance and the rebellion we used to for our mediocre that causes us to launch out of some rocket to then smack into the cliff wall of the jagged mountain and come stumbling back down to end up even further than where we started, how about we try it a different way? How about we try focusing on our mediocre? Focus on your current, most reliable level of performance. Your mediocre, and embrace it. Engage it. Fall in love with what you currently have. Not what you wish you had because that person has that and you wish you had this and all those things. All the while creating more resistance and rebellion and avoidance to your current circumstances. And then we become more and more convinced in our brain that our circumstances need to change for us to change. And we get into what a lot of people have talked about, and where we believe that if we could have this, then we'd do this, and we'd finally be this. Only to find out that it doesn't work that way. It actually creates this paradoxical hamster wheel of misery and frustration and life never being enough. We want to be able to fall in love with the journey. We want to be able to fall in love with ourselves. We want to be able to engage and embrace us, our current mediocre. That doesn't mean we don't have moments where we can outperform, but we're not doing those from a place of resistance. We're not doing those from a place of rebellion, from a place of avoidance. Because rebellion, resistance, and avoidance never adds up to success. Ever. In fact, it's the number one cause of keeping you stuck or even having you digress, move backwards. So you're going to want to start heightening your awareness. Start improving your radar of figuring out what you are resisting. What are you rebelling? What are you avoiding in your life? And surrender to it. Embrace it. Allow it to be a part of you. Allow yourself to be able to sort through some of your excuses. Your excuses, your rationalizations, your justifications, which are often the stuff we resist, rebel, and avoid, that we are unwilling to embrace and give purpose to. Some of the most challenging things you've been through, some of the most difficult things in your life are going to be the things that inspire you the most when you embrace them and bring purpose to them. If you just try and avoid them, try and resist them, try and rebel against, I'm so over that. I let go of that years ago. No, you didn't. You just shoved it behind you, but you're still carrying it, okay? And carrying it is getting heavier and heavier and heavier. You've just become so used to it, so unconscious of what's back there, that it's making it very difficult for you to be able to continue to progress, to continue to grow. If you want to find steady growth, consistently be searching for the things in your life that you resist and you rebel and you avoid. That's where we find deeper growth. That's where we find joy in the journey. And that's where your mediocre a year from now, okay, is going to be totally different from your mediocre of where it is right now when you do it this way. Rather than continually trying to create more gunpowder, more firepower to launch yourself into the future you, only to be disappointed by what you find and pounded by unmet expectations to fall all the way back into a place of misery and frustration and doubting yourself and all kinds of things. So let's seek out, what are you resisting? What are you rebelling in your life? What are you avoiding? Are you willing to take some time today and write down, what am I resisting? And just let your hand go. Just start writing. What am I resisting in my life? What are the things that I'm trying to push away from me that might be something I could lean into and learn a lot about the dialogue that's holding me back? What are the things they're rebelling against? The things that I just think are just not okay, and that's just not me, and I just don't do that, and I can't stand those people, and I hate this and that. What if we leaned into that rebellion and we started to unpack it and heard the dialogue that was holding us back? What are we avoiding that we're afraid of or ashamed of that we could lean into and hear the dialogue that's holding us back so that we can create the habits and the principles to be on an inspired path, to have the future we're looking to create pull us there rather than need forced action that just turns into our passion becoming boring, repetitious, and mundane, and then we have to try and grit ourselves there. And unfortunately, whatever it takes to get here is what it takes to stay there. So if you fight to get there, you're going to have to fight to stay there. And that's disappointing. But if you become, if you're inspired to get there, you'll be inspired to stay there and even go beyond. That's what we want to see you do. We want to see you intentionally create your future. We want to see you embrace where you're currently at to do it. And understand the difference between your passion, your heart, your core, to be encouraged to stretch and grow, versus allowing the the core part of your brain that's there to keep you alive. We appreciate that part of it. But when it comes to personal growth, it works against us more often than not to create that systemic dilemma. We can either have all of it or none of it. And so if you want any of your current reality, that part of the brain is just convinced, well, then you just need to settle for what you have. And then you say, I don't want to settle for what I have. So it deploys resistance, rebellion, and avoidance to try and stoke the fire hot enough to get you to jump out of the pot. But then we jump out of the pot into the fire, and it ends up even worse than how we started. Versus being on an inspired path, allowing our future selves to pull us there, to be able to go here and get clarity of what this future feels like, and then deploy that energy here. That's an inspired path. Not to think about what this future will feel like, bring it back to our current reality and see the disparity between the two. Oh, this is what my future felt like, but my current reality sucks. And then this part of your brain is going to try and capitalize on that to get you to avoid pain, to be able to get you to have short-lived, gunpowder shots to try and get up there, only to continue to land somewhere short and slide on back. We want to create steps. We want to create millimeters in our growth and what we're looking to become, so that we choose today to be inspired, to be focused on these steps rather than to be resistant and rebellious and avoidant. If we do that, then we're just focus on having things. Because then if we can have those things, then we'll do these things, and then we'll be, but it completely thwarts the equation of success and completely works against the thought processes you're going to want to shift and embrace to create the best version of you. I hope this helps some of you who have been holding your current life hostage, who have been here convincing yourself consciously or unconsciously, because many of us do this unconsciously. And you'll find out in your habit finder, and you can visit with a member of my team for free to explore some of this. And you can see what kind of dreams you're creating up here and how it's affecting the way it's actually playing out in your life. And you'll be able to see whether you're creating resistance, rebellion, and avoidance, or whether you're creating inspired action and passion-driven action and encouragement and abundance. We can measure that in your habit finder. And regardless of where it is, deploy the principles of how to start shifting those things, how to be able to optimize those things better, to be able to get to the future you and love the journey every step along the way. Because this isn't the destination. As we get closer to here, we're already creating an even further out version of our lives because we're just in love with the creation. We're in love with the journey. And that's a beautiful place to live. And I invite all of you to start to figure out what the mechanisms in your own brain that are frustrating this process. I wish this came naturally. But when we've got opposing forces of our heart, our passion, our core, our courage, and our brain's systemic dilemmas and all or nothing justifications, we're going to want to understand those dynamics. We're going to understand that biology to be able to get where we want to go. So we look forward to hoping to help as many of you as possible to get there, and hope today's message helped you get a little bit closer to letting go of this hostage situation where you're holding your current life hostage and letting it go so that you can embrace who you currently are. You can choose you and create everything you ever dreamed of with what you already have. Pretty amazing way to live. Thanks so much for being here today. Please remember, our mission is your success. Let us know how we can help you. Everybody have a great day. Take care.